Hello, okay, so today I wanted to talk to you about backups, and I was going to do a whole video and I was going to draw pictures for you, and it was going to be like, a bit funky and everything. But guess what? The battery ran out in my camera and I mislaid the cable, so yeah, you're not the only one. It happens to us professionals as well, and we are only human. But anyway, so I decided to do this instead. So we're going to do a little slideshow. I'm going to tell you about backups as quickly as I can because there's a lot to cram in into a few minutes. So this is your computer. Now, a computer has got data on the computer, obviously, important data. If you haven't got important data on your computer and you basically only use your machine to like browse the web and you don't store any files or anything, well then you don't necessarily have to worry about a backup. So all happy days. But if you've got things like photos, documents and such like that, then this is definitely something that you need to pay attention to. So here we go. Right, so first type of backup that you can do is an external drive. Now that's a physical drive that you will then plug into your computer. You can schedule it to run once a week, say on a Sunday, something like that, and then you have to make sure that it is plugged in for that time. For it to then run. Some programs pick up where they last left off, so if you don't plug it in time, it will then notice that you've plugged it in and then the backup will run, but not all of them do, so double check that. You may have to run it manually with some of the softwares. So there's the external drives there. Also, another form of backup is cloud backup. Now what that means is that you would rely on your internet connection in order to connect to the internet, because that's what the cloud is. The cloud is the internet. And then you would then store your data on the internet. So those are the two main types of backup. There are a couple of other things which people consider backups which are not backups, which we're going to go to in just a second. This is a hard drive from your computer, inside your computer. That's what it looks like on the inside. It's got a turning disk, moving parts, blah blah blah. Now this bar at the top here represents your physical drive, okay, and what some new computers do is that they partition this drive into two sections, C drive and D drive, and some people think that they have two physical drives in their computer, so what they'll do is they'll set backups running from their C drive onto their D drive. That is not good practice. The time that a C and a D partition on a drive is a good thing is you would have your system or your programs and the operating system on one partition, you'll have your data on another partition, so that if something happens to that partition then you can just rebuild it and the D partition is still intact and everything's fine there. This kind of thing would be to prevent any problems with, to tackle problems with infection and OS corruption, things like driver problems, software problems, all that kind of stuff. But if something happens to the actual drive itself, then that means that both partitions are affected. So it basically is obsolete. What the backup that you think that you had in place is not working. Now, this isn't always the case when you see a C and a D partitions and what you would call a C and a D drive on your computer, because you can have two separate disks in a computer. One could be looking after the C partition, which is always the system drive, and the other one could be the D, which is just basically an extra drive. You can put data on there, you can back up the whole of the C drive to the D drive, you can clone over, you can image backup, anything like that. You've basically got two separate drives. So if one fails, the other one is backup. In our custom builds, we have the system on one and the data on the other for different reasons. But so if you've bought a computer off of us and it's got these two and it's a custom build, then you do have two physical drives. You don't have one drive that's partitioned, but some laptops do the latter one, that one there, as a default. Okay, so the next thing to talk about is so basically the other thing was not a backup. That's as in that bit is not a good backup. So the next thing to think about is the actual cloud sharing of files. This is not a fully fledged backup. Yes, if something was to happen to your computer, your files are not affected, you can rebuild the computer and everything is hunky-dory. It's a little bit like the C and the D partition that we were talking about before, in the sense where you've got the system on one and the data on the other. But the thing is if anything happens to anything here, then it's more complicated. And this part here is saying if there's anything goes wrong with your internet connection, then you can't access your files. But that's obviously, you know, something that you take into consideration when you have something like this kind of service, so you know stuff like that. But what I was going to say is that some companies claim that they will restore your files as historically up to 30 days. So you can go back, say 5 days previously, and you can restore a file that you had deleted. The problem with that is that we have looked on some of these companies' websites, and not one point in their websites do they say that they are actually a backup service. It's a feature of the service that they can provide, but it's not the same kind of reliability. You're relying on a company to restore your files. You know, if you had everything stored locally, or if you had a proper backup in place, it would be literally, you know, it would be more of a solid service. And so long story short, we do not consider file sharing in the cloud as a backup. You just can't do that. It's just, it doesn't make sense from our point of view. So that is pretty much the different types of backups. Now we can look at the costs of the backups. The external hard drives, they start off, these is kind of like the average price range and the average sizes that you can get. Because I didn't want to put any solid prices on here, because I want to be able to show this, you know, video in the future without, you know, with all the different kinds of spectrum. You can see that the kind of the average style prices that you can get for the amount of gigs that you've got. 2 terabytes, by the way, is 2,000 gigabytes. With the cost of the cloud backup, so in internet backup, it can be as little as £2 a month, but it's always per monthly. Or per yearly or quarterly or whatever, but you'll always constantly be paying for that service, whereas with the external drives it's a one-off fee for that drive itself. Okay, and then you know, you're paying per gig, whereas in this case, you know, you've got a chunk of gigabyte. This one is obviously, you can see the difference in scale. You know, you can imagine scaling that by, you know, up to, if you want to say 500 gig from 1 gig. So yeah, you can see that the difference is there. The reason you would have cloud backup, which I've just said before, is because you would home in on some information that you held really important to backup, because cloud backup is a good form of backup. It's not a bad form of backup at all. It's just a different type of backup. It just means that it's not physically where you are. So if anything was to happen to your house, you know, fire or theft or anything like that, then the backup is completely off-site. You know, and again, it's just weighing out the pros and cons of the two. So the cloud storage obviously has its benefits because it's off-site, which is what we consider off-site, and a lot of businesses have their backups off-site. And then obviously with the physical drives, again, you can do a backup and then take the backup off and then take that into another building or into another town. Again, that would be considered the backup being off-site, but obviously it has to come on-site to do the initial backup. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry it was like really quick, but again, there's a lot to take in. You really want to get your backup checked to make sure that it's running properly. Even if a professional has set the backup for you, you know, anything can go wrong from there on. So you must, you know, keep an eye on your backups, make sure that they're running. The biggest thing to happen is that people forget to plug in their external hard drives. Obviously, with a cloud-based backup, they don't forget, because they don't need to, because once they're connected to the internet, the backup software will all look after itself. So, you know, but the cost of backing everything up is obviously cheaper with an external drive. So please remember to plug your drives in and to check that the software is running okay and all that kind of stuff. Any questions, give us a call. Obviously, get your computers checked out by us and make sure that everything's running smoothly. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.